We are talking now about the second half of this week's book club reading assignment. And before we do, I want to point out that we're actually skipping a number of issues. We're skipping the Night of the Monster Men crossover between Batman Detective Comics and Nightwing. And we're also skipping a story arc called is it called the Victim Syndicate? What is the name of the story? And
it's called Victim Syndicate.
Victim Syndicate. And I actually, in looking at my notes on these, I liked this story even better than the first Detective Comics story. I gave a lot of it perfect scores on a per issue basis. It's just not as big a part of Batwoman's arc, so we're not going to discuss it in detail. But Faria, why don't you just share in general what it's about and like why we both love it so much? Because it was about a really interesting thing.
Right. So it's kind of sets up the later stuff. Like, Spoiler is kind of still in grief after Red Robin died in air quotes, the previous arc. And then one of the cooler aspect of this is that for the first time, I think in Batman history, I could be totally wrong about it, that they talk about what happens to collateral damage, or what happens to innocent bystanders whenever Batman fights one of his rogue gallery. And it turns out that they decided to band together and create something called a Victim Syndicate, and then decide to kind of take down Batman, while forgetting that as they're doing it, they're making other people the victim. So kind of the logic kind of falls apart, but they're all victims. So what are you going to do? What can you do about it?
And I have so much to say about it, and I'm like biting my tongue. Yeah, I think it says a lot about that superheroes, especially DC superheroes, which tend to be born of tragedy, the whole, like, my mother's name was Martha. Like, that superheroes are, in a way, perpetuating a cycle of violence and abuse. And, like, even the people who are trying to put right what happens with the superheroes are part of that cycle. If y'all love Detective Comics, I'm sure you could convince Free and I to come back for, like, a one-off live show to talk about Detective Comics, because I think we're both really, really liking this run. But let's fast forward to the next story, which is this two-part story, and it deals with some of the ramifications of the Night of the Monster Man, which is that there's this like toxic monster blood, whatever, that you can use to turn yourself into a monster and basically like be a terrorist threat of being a monster. It's like a little not the clearest motive there, but the colony wants to take advantage of that and put that in their arsenal of stuff. And so they steal some of the blood, but they also want to break the Colonel out because he's being held captive by this Detective Comics team right now. And then the third thing is, like, Kate Kane, for better or for worse, tends to be the bat person that's associated with supernatural monsters at this point. So all of those plots kind of converge in this very brutal, kind of personal two-issue story where the Colonel's second in command is trying to break him out of the Belfry, which is their headquarters. And he's also got the monster blood. And it's like, can Batwoman stop him, stop her father from breaking out, and stop the monster blood from being, taken by the military or sold on the black market?
And the thing is, like, we also see that, the Rebirth story of how Batwoman and Batman first time met. So, it's like, it's a little bit different, that in the sense, like, Batman actually followed her around and then showed up to her headquarters, and then they had a tussle. And then later on, like, Batwoman actually, like, breaks his leg or whatever. And then, later on, she met with, a week later, she apparently met with Bruce Wayne, like her cousin, like, as cousins. And then she saw that he was slightly limping a little bit. And that's how she finds out that Bruce Wayne is Batman. So that's kind of kind of revealed in this two issues as well.
Part of me liked it, and part of me felt like it was a little bit recursive or redundant. Because we just read these books, it was fresh in my mind, the chronology of when he doesn't know she's Batman, or she's Batwoman, which we saw in the Zero issue before the New 52 run, where he's like following her around. So this part where he drops in and he sees that she's Kate Kane has to basically happen directly after that 2010 Zero issue in order for her chronology to make any kind of sense at all. So there was like that part of me that was like going into reading order mode. But then there's also the part of me that liked the little nod to Batman Returns, the Tim Burton film, where Batwoman or Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne are seeing each other socially, and they're making out, and they both find the wounds that they left on each other as Batman and Catwoman. And like, I don't think, even though that's a common superhero trope, when it comes to Batman, I don't think you can invoke it without at at least winking a little bit at that scene in the movie. And so it kind of made me chuckle that they're using that, you know, for this Batwoman, Batman relationship, which is a familial one, rather than typically the way it's used, which tends to be between two people that are like flirting with each other.
Right. And yeah, and it's kind of like, I kind of forgot about 89 Batman. I haven't seen it in like such a long time. So yeah, it's kind of like, but yeah, it's actually, it was a cool moment. And then, yeah, so there was like a little bit flash forward and flashbacks over here. And as you pointed out, that now we are just kind of dealing with, you know, this second in command coming to rescue Colonel from the jail in Belfry. So there's not a lot going on, because I think what it does, it sets up for Batwoman by Marguerite Bennett.
Right. It feels like a bit, you know, television shows do a backdoor pilot where they like introduce new characters in the current show. It feels like a backdoor pilot, like it's Batwoman issue -1. And for that reason, it actually, I thought it was a good story, but it kind of sucks a little bit in terms of the Detective Comics run, because it pulls away that like awesome merry-go-round of focus on all of the different characters, and it really just feels like a Batwoman story.
Right, and I think it's instead of calling it Detective Comics, if they call it Batwoman Zero, I think that would have been a better. Like, it's kind of, because I was thinking that, oh, this will fall directly into the next issue of Detective Comics.
But it doesn't. The next issue
as well,
is like
exactly. Completely different, one of the best ones. But the thing is, like, it's just like, it just moves to Batwoman. So to me, because of that, I was like, oh, you know, I was a little bit, okay, sure.
And then adding to the feeling for me, because I felt very similarly to you, is that then there's a Batwoman Rebirth issue, but the Rebirth issue is pretty much just a third Batwoman Zero in the span of 7 years.
Oh my God.
Because it just recaps. Now, I know that we just read all this stuff, so for me, it's kind of, but even when I read it the first time, I was like, do we really need to rehash all of these scenes that we've seen before in Batwoman? Like, none of the other Rebirth specials did this. The other Rebirth specials were way more about the future, and I just don't know that Batwoman's past is so confusing compared to like any other hero that we needed this whole like origin retelling, when, as you said, it felt like that arc in Detective could have easily been the Rebirth story, because it told you all that you needed to know about Batwoman.
Well, the thing is, though, I think I understand why they would do it, though, because let's say that you just picked this up as a first-time reader of Batwoman, you would need it. Right? You think that you need it, because the thing is, that's one of the things I actually saw some critique, or like, you know, critique, as you can think about comic critique on by amateurs like ourselves, on some certain places. Like, they found that Kate, like Batwoman's involvement with the Bat family, to be boring, and they weren't sure why she was the one that Batman chose to be the trainer. But the thing is, me, who's someone who read all the Batwoman book, completely understood why that would be the case. And I was excited about it, because this is like, for the first time, Batwoman is actually connected to the Bat family. And they didn't understood that. So I would think that somewhere in Detective Comic should have had this story as well, or like a 1 page of Batwoman's history crash course for people to kind of figure that out. So, and that doesn't happen until like that 2 issues. And then the thing is, like,
I mean, we're talking about issue 949, and it started on 934, and it was twice monthly. So this is like 6 months in. I could see people reading it for 6 months and being like, who the hell is this Batwoman?
Right.
And
the thing is, like,
too late for them.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, oh, her father was like the main character, like one of the, turned out to be a main plot point for first story arc and everything. But the thing is, like, I only knew about all of this. And I would be honest, if I wasn't reading Batwoman for this awesome book club that we do, even I would be like, who the hell is she? Like, I would have been like, I'm like, okay, I understand, she's very cool, but like, there's nothing you're giving me to show me that, right? So,
and I think about how they handled the launch of JLA, which was also one of like second tier Rebirth titles, where they actually did a Rebirth issue for all of the members that are in the team, and they were really good. I haven't liked JLA as much, but I liked all the Rebirth issues, and I think that it was like, I almost kind of wish that we could go back and see a Rebirth issue for all of the characters on the Detective Comics team, because you and I have talked about that we're not really sure what's going on with Spoiler, and like we don't know Orphan that well, and you didn't know Red Robin that well, so it's kind of like, gosh, maybe that would have been nice for Detective to get a Rebirth. It didn't. Batman had one Rebirth issue for all of the Batman titles, and it was much more a tickler for Tom King and Scott Snyder's Batman titles than it was for Detective. So it's, like we can play armchair quarterback as much as we want to. The question becomes like, were the issues good of themselves? Like, even if we would have rather they be placed somewhere else. I ultimately think that the Batwoman Rebirth issue, it was fine. It was the greatest hits of her history. It was okay. The thing that excited me though was not the Rebirth issue itself, but the way that her arc was something we talked about in the last week episode, which was that we both really liked the idea of what we saw in the second Batwoman Zero from 2012, which is that she effectively has a lost year or two when her father sends her off into the world to experience it. And we both had the same reaction, which was, wow, I would read Grayson, but with Batwoman, where Batwoman's being a secret agent, and we see all of the connections that she made. And that's what the series actually turns out to be, which they did not market it at all like that, except for it's not like James Bondy, like Nightwing. It's almost, I can't even really describe it. It's almost more, it's romantic. It's more romantic, and it's much more of like a intrigue story about the sovereignty of a whole country. Like, I don't know what I would compare it to, but it's not James Bond. I guess it almost feels like more like Mission Impossible, maybe, which I know that they're like really similar series, but I'm trying to articulate.
You want to throw out Fast and the Furious, maybe?
I don't know. It's
like
because it's like so close to the thing that I was asking for, but then it's like not quite the thing I was asking for, and I'm trying to reconcile that in my mind. I mean, what was your reaction to it? Because it's very different than any Batwoman story we've had previously.
Right. And the thing is, like, when I talked about, Batwoman, like, the Lost Year story, like, I want to, like, because New 52 Batman actually did it, like, that I read first time, where he's going around, and there's always this, like, little chunks at the end where they show that how he's learning this new fighting technique, or how he's learning this, like, there's this flashback stories that you're like, okay, what's this about? But then the story actually shows him using that skill.
Yeah,
right?
That was actually a part I really enjoyed about Snyder.
Right, it's amazing. So I was kind of hoping for something similar to that, or maybe just but then, okay. So the reason I wasn't very warmed to it is that because that she didn't learn any skills in it. It was. It wasn't like she's learning something or anything. It was just like, oh, there was some boat accident, and she found herself ashore in this island, which is actually controlled by this one lady who is somehow controls, she's like the den mother of this, of this group of drug dealers, or
pirates,
right, like some
mercenaries.
Mercenaries, some kind of unsavory characters, you would say. And then they control the island, and she kind of is a peacekeeper among them, and she takes her in, and then it's her kind of like they have a romantic relationship, and it's kind of like that story of that. I don't know. I mean, it's a fine story, but the thing is, like, it's not like you said, it's not like any of the other Batwoman stories we read, and it was a little bit of cliche driven, and it was fine.
Well, I think your whole ramble there actually gets at the thing I struggled with, which is that it felt like. Sometimes, look, I like to think about the reality of how comics are made, right? That somebody comes in and pitches the story, and ultimately the company says yes or no to the pitch. Unless you're somebody huge who just does like Brian Bendis, who says, I want to write that, and they just like hand it to you. And even still, you hear stories about how Bendis pitched. And sometimes you get the sense that one of these pitches is a story that could have like worked anywhere. Like, it's not specific to that character. And that's how I felt about this Marguerite Bennett and James Tynion story. It felt interesting, and it was a good story, but at no point in the story did I feel like, oh, I've been waiting to find this out about Batwoman's lost year. It just was like a story that happened to happen in her lost year. It felt almost like a fill-in story. Like, it didn't feel critical to me. And I think the thing that like crystallized that for me and what you were just saying is that in the Snyder story, we flash back to like Batman learning a specific skill, and then we flash forward to Batman using the skill. But we get all sorts of flashbacks and jumps back to the present in this Batwoman story. And at no point did I ever get the feeling of like, oh, that explains why Batwoman did X, Y, Z. It just like never got a through line. It felt like this, she secretly was a pirate and she never mentioned it.
Right. And the thing is, like, it's also like, only thing that was connecting the past to the present is because her relationship to this lady named Sophia. And, it was because of that. And yeah, it's fine. And the thing is, like, I feel like a little bit of like, they do it a lot with Batman trying to create a parallel between Batman and Batwoman, and I think with this one they given her Talia al Ghul.
Oh yeah, like I was immediately beaten over the head with the like, here's the Talia al Ghul illusion of Batwoman.
Right, and if she had a father or a mother that was like involved in magic showed up, I'll be like, screw this. I would actually be like, nope, stop. And it's one of those thing. But the thing is, like, she starts here, comes here because she's tracking down the blood of the monster man, which is kind of, and that's also another thing, because in the last, like, we're talking about that in Detective Rebirth, there's like an issue with, like, there's a connection with the monster man blood are being black marketed, and she kind of follows that thread, and that brings her to somewhere in Pakistan or some places, and then that kind of brings her back to her past, but at no point that was ever mentioned again.
Yeah, it did feel weirdly disconnected. Like we got lost in this other story, and it like stopped being about that. And I don't want to. So I think that I want to draw a line here, because there was our critique that we did last time of the Batwoman Wonder Woman story in World's Finest, where we like really went in. Like we did not like that story or the way it was executed artistically.
Right.
I don't get this. That's not my feeling about this one. Like I thought these were great. They were better than average. I liked them. They were very well drawn. Steve Epting is one of my favorite artists and has been since 1992. It's not that kind of a critique. It just kind of felt like, Batwoman.
Yeah, and that's the thing though, and it's kind of hard to describe it, because I can usually be passionate about some things I love and some things I hate. So this was one of those in the middle. There's parts I liked, parts I didn't like. So now I'm kind of struggling to come up with anything witty to say about them. So, and it's like I said, it's like a necessary, but I don't know, like her introduction to Rebirth, her only solo title to Rebirth should have been better. That's the only, if this was the third arc of her run, perfect. This would have been perfect as a third arc. But this as a first arc for her solo title.
I think I have 4 little points I want to make about it, but no big point. So I'm going to try to be quick. I know I can run on, but okay. So number 1. And this involves some Marvel comparisons because it's the world that I know. When I think about supporting characters like this at Marvel, I think about X-23, who has become Wolverine. And the way that X-23, there's no bad X-23 issue. Like you can just have a long box of every issue she's ever headlined and pick one out, and they're all pretty good. And I feel like Batwoman had a similar pedigree, even if we came down hard on the stuff towards the end of J.H. Williams because of art reasons. I feel like up until the end of that run, you could still pick out any issue and be like, okay, this is pretty cool. I think we just got like weary. Whereas I think, but then after J.H. Williams left the title, I think DC kind of lost the plot of like what Batwoman is or what Batwoman is about, which X-23 Marvel has like never lost that plot. And DC has characters that they've never lost that plot with either, right? And that's why I don't like the rest of the New 52 Batwoman run. It's why I do like the Detective Comics with Batwoman we were talking about this week. And it's the same reason I don't like this Batwoman run, because I think it just has forgotten what she's about. Like it doesn't feel like it's imperative that we learn this story about Batwoman. And so it kind of feels like she's lost that cachet as like a character there's some writer or some editor who's like really championing her. Yeah. It feels like we've like lost that. So that was my first point. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I think in my previous ramble I kind of hinted at that too. It's like,
yeah, you did.
A new reader is not invested enough in Batwoman to see her lost year. and they forgot that this is a new reader will pick this up, because this is supposed to be Rebirth, right? And that's the thing. To me, it's like, okay, like, sure.
Okay, so here's my second point. Again, a Marvel comparison, but maybe you can think of a good DC analog. This one hair keeps falling into my eye, and then I can't see you, so that's why I'm fussing myself so much. Okay. I'm just going to do like this for this whole point. So I think about Hawkeye, Matt Fraction's Hawkeye, and Matt Fraction's Hawkeye is in no way similar to this, but it treats him almost as like kind of bumbling. Like it shows all of the mistakes that he makes. But the real reason it's so effective is because we've seen him be a perfect hit the target marksman for years. DC does the same thing with Green Arrow. DC is really, at points, makes Green Arrow a screw up, but it only works because you know how good Green Arrow is when he's not being a screw up. You know, because you've been reading the Mike Bell run. Lots of terrible things happen to him, but you never doubt that he's a competent hero. I think part of the problem with Batwoman is that, especially at the end of New 52 and then here, it kind of only shows her like people getting the drop on her making bad decisions, which is fine. Like, I don't need a character to always be right all the time, whether they're a male or a female character. It doesn't matter to me that they're right all the time. But if you want me to believe that they're like a good superhero, I got to see them be successful. And Batwoman, it feels like at this point has a crappy track record. And I don't think that this arc did anything for that. So like, unlike Hawkeye, some people complain that Hawkeye is made out to be too stupid in Hawkeye, but I'm like, everybody's stupid sometimes. But like in this Batwoman arc, I kind of feel like, oh, here's more of Batwoman being stupid.
Yeah, you're right. I'm telling you, I just don't have the motivation to talk about this.
Okay, well then I'm gonna just bang right through this. Okay.
No. But the thing is, like, it's actually true. You're right. It's like another one of those. I'm like, okay, and a little bit like, you can forgive her. This is her this is kind of her lost year, so she's not a Batwoman yet. The mistake she made before.
The past action is her last year, but the rest of the action is present day.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. Like, this is like, you're talking about the present actions. Yeah, some of the present action was still kind of like, wait, what are you doing? Like, it's like more of a, she was acting like a Hal Jordan, and how much
and we know how we feel about him.
Oh my God!
Yeah, not our favorite DC hero. Okay, so point number. Although I will say there is a very well choreographed fight in issue number 4. So point the third of 4. Issue number 5 is Stephanie Hans on interior art. She's one of my favorite comic book artists. She does not do a lot of interiors. She does a lot of covers. She did some interiors at Journey into Mystery. She did some interiors for Angela series and Marvel, which Marguerite Bennett co-wrote, and that's probably where they made their connection, one would think. This particular issue, I really, really liked. If they had done this one issue 5, as a Rebirth special or as a one-shot to kind of be like, here's one thing that happened in Batwoman's lost year, and then told the story, I think I would have been more interested, because it's actually intriguing. It's this very romantic superhero washes up on the shore kind of story, almost like how Steve Trevor washes up and the Amazons take care of him, except for Batwoman is both Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman in this example, and she washes up on the shore. And Faria criticized a little bit of like, oh, she's, it's the romantic triangle plot, whatever, but like, I kind of just thought it was very well done. Like, just because a trope is a trope doesn't mean that it's bad every time. And in terms of like a very painterly, romantic, sunlit love triangle throwback, hero washes up on the beach issue, this was really damn good. I would hold it up against any, like, Captain America washes up on the beach, Batman washes up on the beach. Like, I think this is one of my favorite single issues that does that kind of a thing. Even though I didn't really like the rest of the arc that results from the flashback that we get in this issue. And
the thing is, though, the art saved it for me.
Oh, the art is just amazing. Yeah.
Right. Because that's the thing. Like, I don't remember much of it, but I really do remember art. But the thing is, another thing I would give it, though, I always kind of like it when it's like the another supporting character, or kind of like the villain character, talks about the protagonist. And, it's like from the point of view of the villain character. So I kind of, or villain in air quote, like, and the antagonist or whatever, like, so I kind of really liked that about it. But the thing is, like, one of the things that kind of the theme of breathe, that they kind of repeats again and again, and that kind of comes from her not being able to breathe when she was kidnapped. So that throwback was kind of very effective.
That's the kind of thing I've been looking for from this whole arc. That's the specific thing that I was looking for, which was connection. And
Right.
maybe that's why I loved this issue so much, because it just felt really connected.
Right, and but the thing is, but to be honest though, yeah, despite my criticism of this, that kind of teared me up a little bit. Really made me a little bit misty eyed because she was just telling herself to breathe again and again because she was drowning. There was like a storm happened and she was drowning and all of that jazz, and then yeah, so yeah, I like from that point of view, it was probably the best of the six.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the last issue is a little bit puzzling if you haven't been reading more of Detective Comics. So it's a future issue. We have no idea what the future is or about. We just see that Gotham is in this like militarized state. There's a different Batman other than Bruce and Gotham. I'm not going to spoil who it is. And Batwoman is coming back to Gotham to confront this new Batman. And the colony is also involved. So A, I don't know if it would make any sense to you if you hadn't been reading Detective, which is part of why I wanted to read Detective as part of this. But B, this deepens your understanding of the Detective leading up to Detective 975 so much. Like, I did not like it as a Batman issue, but it adds so much to a read of Detective that, much as I think the Detective issues we just talked about should have really been Batwoman issues, I think this Batwoman issue should have been a Detective issue, because it just deepens the conflict that we get into there so much, and it goes a long way to explaining why Detective is probably my favorite superhero title of 2017, tied with Thor.
Right, and that's the thing though, because as soon as I reading it, thankfully I read the Detectives, and I'm like, oh.
So I didn't know if you got that far in Detective, so you get why I'm saying that.
No, I haven't gotten that far.
Oh, you haven't gotten that far.
Yeah, I'm not gotten that far. So it's kind of, I kind of enjoy it though, because when it's like, oh, a little hints that's given to what's to come. And, I wasn't sure exactly the timeline on when this came out and when 75 came out. So this came out previous to 75, I'm assuming.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at the months. Wait, I have that. So 75, 75 is really new. That's just been in the last couple of months. So this was before that.
Right. So it's kind of like, okay, like, even the current readers are reading it in the same way. So it's like, yeah, I was kind of like, oh my God. And, it made me want to read Detective even more. Like, I'm just like now really looking forward to it, because I'm like, oh no, what's going to happen? How did we get to there? And what's like, so yeah. So in a way, it kind of made me excited about it. Whether it made me excited about reading the next Batwoman, no, it didn't.
Yeah, I would be fine with this as the last issue. Like, I get that there's more for her to do as part of her plot, but I had been saving this because I knew we were going to read it together, and now I'm kind of like, there's 6 more issues. Like, but I think the thing to leave everybody with, because it's the end, we made it through a whole month of our book club, is that Batwoman is very much a part of the DC universe right now, and you absolutely could be reading Detective and be getting your full share of Batwoman, even if you're not picking up this Batwoman title. And she is absolutely integral to the things that are happening in Detective that are working towards the culmination of James Tynion's run. So I would say, if you liked a lot of the Batwoman we read up until this point, and you're kind of like, ooh, about what we're saying in this episode, just keep reading Detective Comics. I think you will really be pleased with where Batwoman winds up going.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think it's a good thing though for her to be now part of the Bat family, and I think that unless you have the way J.H. Williams did it, that kind of works, or you doing the way Detective Comics doing it, where she's the part of the Bat family and she's the she is the trainer / mentor for them, and how her involvement there. So it's kind of one or the other. But yeah, as a last reminder of book club, if nothing else of Batwoman that you want to read, you should read this run. You should read Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams, the book with the complete collection with whatever numbers of issues. But this was the best of all the ones that we have read for this book club. To me, the first was actually the best one.
Yeah. Like, I think it's one of the best comics I've read. I don't even think it's one of the best Batwoman or Batman or DC. I just think it's good comics.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, the Detective Comics is kind of different. It kind of goes onto the different tangent. So yeah, I wouldn't count that. But the thing is, in terms of Batwoman or just a purely good comics, just read this one.
Yeah. So I want to end with a question. If they were to announce a new Batwoman series, and we know how much we love this character now, what would make you really excited about the series? It could be a creator, it could be a theme, it could be a plot. What thing would make you be like, yes, I'm excited for Batwoman again?
I think it would be a creator to me,
Yeah.
because the thing is, like, that's one of the things about superheroes is that their stories are going to be repetitive, and then it's going to be the same things again and again, at least to me. I don't know. So to me it has to be like a creator that's attached to it, and I would be very much very like interested into knowing what direction that goes.
I think for me, it's a little bit more. I want her to have a signature villain other than Alice and other than random monsters. I would really get excited if they were going to bring Batwoman back and say, like, she's in Gotham, she's doing her thing, but there's another writer who's going to kind of take a swing at what J.H. Williams did at the beginning of Hydrology, where it really seemed like La Llorona was going to be like this ongoing Batman villain, this drowning lady. And before we realized it was all about Medusa and it got so big, I want to see some smaller stories that gives her a rogues gallery that we could come back to. And I think that's what the remainder of the 52 run tried to do, and I just don't know if it was super successful, but it at least made me interested to try to read it. And I think that would really get me to tune into another volume of Batwoman. It would be smaller stories with interesting new villains or repurposed older villains that maybe builds out some more relationships for her in this universe.
Or the thing is, you bring up another good point, though. It's like with the Hydrology, it's like if she can now become the face of mythology of Gotham, and she's kind of dealing with that aspect of it, like, that because Batman kind of deals with all the crooked, all the villains and stuff, but she kind of deals with all the Gotham cities, like, take your all the mystical, like mythical creature that comes out of New 52 run, or your Court of Owls, or this kind of people, and then kind of deals with that.
I've seen some people say that they would like to see a new Justice League Dark title, where she's kind of like the token superhero, because on one hand, it's fun to see her go up against mythological stuff, but on the other hand, she would be super out of her depth as like a military person if she was hanging out with Constantine and Zatanna.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I would totally be in for like a Batwoman, Zatanna, Constantine lineup, because that seems really intriguing to me.
Yeah, that's okay. That's kind of true. So who would you want it? Who would be your wish list writer for that?
Gosh, who do I like when they do? Probably Josh Williamson. He does great scary stuff because he did Nailbiter, and he's killing it on Flash. Flash has been so great for just as long as Detective Comics has been great. I think he would do a really good job. The other one that I can think of is, I feel like it's somebody you like. Is his name Justin Jordan?
Justin Jordan, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Justin Jordan could write a really good, like, wacky, effed up, mystical version of these characters that's like nice and violent and tense. I feel like he would be a good one.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that Justin Jordan is over the top, though.
You think it's too much?
No, yeah, that's not gonna fly in a DC comic. Like, I mean, the thing is, like, in terms of like the gore, that he kind of relies on gore and violence a lot, and that's not gonna fly in DC comic. I was thinking, like, in terms of more characterization wise, actually, Brian K. Vaughan.
Well, I mean, if anybody can convince him to come, when's the last time that he wrote a big two superhero comic?
This is I don't know.
This is pure wish list, not based on reality.
Yeah, pure wish list. I don't know whether he's ever gonna do it or stuff. But the thing is, like, I would like to see that, because I don't think I have read a lot of his, like, superheroes, like, big two comics. So yeah, and I know that he is very capable of handling characters with nuances. As a matter of fact, all his characters are nuances, including a character that just shows up for two panels. So I think that I would like to see that with Fiona Staples as artist. Why not? We're wish listing.
I'll throw out one more. Catherine Immonen, who I think a lot of people aren't really aware of because they all know her husband as this amazing penciler. But she wrote the Journey into Mystery title in Marvel Now that had Sith in it. She's done a lot of X-Men, like one-shot limited series stuff. She maintains that kind of more somber tone that Batwoman tends to have, but she's really good at that character stuff. And I've never read her reading a DC book. She's like an instant buy for me. I think she does such great character work that I will always try out a book of hers, even if it's like some weird indie thing. I'm just looking behind me. I have a whole little batch of Imminent stuff right behind me by both she and her husband. And I think she would be really great on Batwoman. I think she gets it, and she would probably write a character really well. So those are some future thoughts, DC. If you're looking for another Batwoman relaunch, feel free to pilfer our ideas, because we love, ultimately, all things being equal, and despite all of our critiques, I do love Batwoman. I came out of this remaining about.
Oh yeah. I mean, I said it before. It's like, I knew I had very limited knowledge of her, and I read all her books and everything. Now I'm just like, a fangirl with like, heart shaped in my eyes, and you're like, oh, Batwoman. But yeah, it's and honestly, with all heroes, they had like really great titles. They had bad titles. So yeah, it's not like, it's one of those kind of part of the deal. So I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to read any more Batwoman, but I love her as a character to continue to read more.
Yeah. Well, that's it for Batwoman Book Club. Thank you so much for sticking with us. If you've watched all of them, or if you were just surfing around and trying a couple points, thanks for checking out this part of the discussion. If you like the book clubs on this channel, we would love for you not only to like the video, but leave us a comment and tell us about what's working, because we're kind of just in a vacuum talking to each other from 8,500 miles away. And so it's great to know what's really working for you, if we got you to be inspired to read the book, or if you feel like now you don't need to read it because of the way we talked about it. And also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because there's regular comics content and possibly some other stuff upcoming as well. And so it gives me a chance to get in front of you and to bring you more stuff like this, along with my amazing co-host, comic superfan fangirl. Thank you so much for agreeing to do some Batwoman with me.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, it was kind of like we just decided to do it in one day, and here we are. And I got to learn about a great character. So yeah, and it has been really fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And this on behalf of myself, Peter, and Faria over there in America, this has been Crushing Comics Batwoman Book Club. Thank you so much for watching.